So example 3 is our last example for the lesson, and we're going to find the domain and range of the graph using interval notation. So take a look at the graph itself and figure out where it starts and where it stops for domain and where it starts and stops for range, and then we're going to write out the actual function or actual domain and range and interval notation. Blah blah blah. Oh my. All right. So with this, if you need to stop the video, go and stop the video to get the two graphs there. And again, with this, you don't actually have to draw it as big as I did. You can actually do it smaller scale, but make sure you do have the numbers written out so I can see what you used or what the numbers are. So every time you graph, I need to see what the numbers are that you have. So it means you have to label your graph. So you have to put the 1, 2, and 3, the negative 1, 2, and 3, the 1, 2, 3, 4, all that for each graph, so I know what you went to and not just assume. So go ahead and do that really quickly. Stop the video, do that really quickly, and I'm going to move forward. So when it comes to domain and range, just like we wrote on the last video, we said domain goes from left to right, where the graph, pretty much where the graph starts and where it stops. So we look at the x values here. So look at this line right here, our x-axis, to find our domain, which are our x values. So when we talk about our domain for this function here, we're looking at, okay, we know that if we go from left to right, there's nothing here at -3. There's nothing past -3 over here. But when we get to -2, that's when our graph actually starts doing something. So we're going to say, starting on our left side, we're starting at -2. And then we're going to follow the graph until we find the x value where it stops. So the graph stops there. And what is your x value there? The x value is 2. So we went from -2 to where it started. And then we follow it and we get to 2 is where we ended. 2. So -2, 2. Now with that, we have to figure out and go back to our interval notation part. We knew when we said when things were less than or equal to, that was a bracket, that was a closed circle, right? When it came to graphing. And then if it was an open circle, which is a less than sign or greater than sign, and that was parenthesis. So bracket again, parenthesis, bracket for equal to, closed circle, parenthesis for open circle, and less than sign or greater than sign. So if we look at these two parts here, where it starts and where it stops. For -2 over here, is that an open circle or closed circle? It's closed, right? So that means we have to have a bracket right here for -2 because of a closed circle there. And then here at at +2, is that an open or closed circle? Closed. So that means it's a bracket again here. So we have our interval notation domain and range, or domain for this graph, is from -2 to +2, but because it's a closed circle, it includes it. So therefore the brackets mean it includes -2 and +2. It includes it. Right, so then let's go to our range really quickly. And our range, again, we said that deals with our y values. So that's our y-axis right here, y-axis. So we look at, see, what is the lowest number on that graph? What is the lowest part here? And then what is the highest part up here? So if we were to look at it, we know this part here is the lowest point on the graph. And we look at that lowest point, we say, okay, what is our y value there? So on the y-axis, that is at -1, right? So the lowest point, lowest part of the graph is at -1 for the y. And then we go up to our highest point and try to figure out what is our y there. And again, here, this is our highest point on the graph. So what is your y value at this point? And we see that is at 3. And both of these are closed circles, so we have brackets here. So again, when it comes to your range, we start from the bottom and go up to see where the graph exists. And so here at -1 is where it starts on the y-axis, and on the top part is right here at 3 where it ends on the y-axis. So your range is from -1 to 3. Closed circles, which means brackets. And again, for the x values, It starts at -2 and it ends at +2, both closed brackets. Okay. So let's try another one to see if it flows a little bit more, or you can understand it still a little bit more. But let's throw in a little twist. And here you see there's an open circle for this part. So that means we're going to have to do something a little bit different instead of bracket. It could be like a parenthesis bracket or something of that sort. So again, with our domain, we're going on the x-axis. Domain means x values. So we're looking at our x-axis, seeing where it starts on the x-axis and where it ends on the x-axis. So here, if you look at it, it starts here at -4. And then we continue the graph and we see where does it stop? Right there at 3 on the x-axis. So comma 3. So it starts at -4 and ends at 3. But again, your parentheses and brackets tell you whether you have an open circle or a closed circle, whether it's equal to it or it's just a less than or greater than sign. So here at -4, there is just an open circle, which means it does not equal -4. So that means we have a parenthesis here, because that again, a parenthesis means does not equal to, it's just less than or greater than. And then here at 3, there's an open circle, a closed circle. So that means here that should be a bracket, because it means it's equal to 3. There is a value at 3. Okay, so not bad. We can do this. And then the last part is our range. And again, we're going from the lowest part of the graph to the highest part of the graph to see where it exists. And if we look at the lowest part of the graph, that's down here. That's the lowest it goes. So that y value is -3. That's the lowest part, lowest y value. Then we go up until we get to the highest part, which is right here. And your y value there is 2. So the lowest part is right there, because again, range is your y values. So -3 is here. That's your lowest part. 2 is your highest part. Again, -3 has an open circle, so it's parenthesis. 2 has a bracket on it because it's a closed circle. Open, close. All right, so we have letter C, and then we are done with the lesson for today. Woo, woo, woo. So here's letter C, and again, if you need to stop the video, go ahead and stop it and draw it out correctly. And one thing I would hope you would already know what this graph's name is, because you've seen it before in the past, so hopefully you know it already. But if you don't, it is a cubic graph, a cubic function, which means f of x is equal to x cubed. And so here, again, we're going to find our domain and range, going from left to right for domain, and range is going from bottom to top. But something else happens here differently than the other two problems, or the other two graphs. If you look at each side here, the graph has an arrow, which means it's going on forever and ever and ever. It doesn't stop. It just continues going, because that's what an arrow means. It continues and it continues and continues forever. Now, with this, I'm going to add these on because we remember them from interval notation that we talked about already. When we do that part, and we talk about interval notation, we said, okay, well, whenever we have an arrow here, that means that, well, I'm going to say this because we didn't say it earlier. Whenever you have an arrow, that means infinity of some sort. If you look at this graph here, this function here, you know that the arrow is going down, but is it just going down, or is it going also to the left of the graph too? It's actually going down and to the left, because if you do cubic function, this function goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. And if you want to put in a calculator, y equals x cubed, and graph it in there, you'll see it continues on forever and ever and ever in both directions. So here, as we're going down, we're also going to the left. And so here, if we look at it, our domain would start at -infinity because the arrow is going down forever, and going to the left forever, forever, never, 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 never. So we're going to start with negative infinity because this is where it's going to start. And then we're going to go, we're going to come from this side, negative infinity, and we're going to go all the way over. And again, we have an arrow at the end of this one. That means it's going to go up forever, but it's also going to the right forever also. So that means we're going to go to infinity for both sides. So negative infinity, positive infinity. And we always have parentheses on infinities, as we said on the interval notation. Now, with this, though, the biggest part, whenever you see an arrow on a graph or a function of some sort like this, always think infinity. No matter where you are, think infinity, because it's going to go to infinity forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Now, if you look at that also for the range, we have arrows on both sides too, as it's going down forever and it's going up forever. And up top, we have positive infinity up here. And the bottom down here of the graph, we have negative infinity. So the same thing is going to happen here from negative infinity to positive infinity for the range. Forever and ever in both directions won't stop. So it's going down for the arrow and means infinity. Going up for the arrow means infinity. So it means it's negative infinity, positive infinity. So again, whenever you see an arrow, it's always going to mean infinity. And if this little confused you a little bit, just call me over and I'll help you out and I'll explain it hopefully a different way that you'll get it. All right? Cool.